a Yaqui Mexican-American Indian. My mother comes from the Sierra Madre, entre medio, in the middle of between Sonora and Chihuahua. And my father comes from Arizona, near the Pascua Yaqui Nation Reservation, although my relations live outside of the reservation. While I was in school, I did communicate with Edward Spicer, author of Cycles of Conquest. It was a school book that we used in college that talked about Native American Indians, and they confirmed for me that my father's family was one of the Yaqui Mexican Indians that was interviewed by Edward Spicer when he wrote Cycles of Conquest. And my worldview is quite different because our values come from indigenous held beliefs and practices. And going to school in North Highlands, where I grew up, I did not see a reflection of myself or my culture or my values. So my father and my mother migrated from Mexico using the Southern Pacific Railroad. And it was the Southern Pacific Railroad that was the only job that my father had, laying track from Elko, Nevada, where I was born, and all the way down to North Highlands. And I attended Highlands High School, and I was very successful in my academics, but because there were not many other Mexican American and no Indians, Mexican American Native Indians going to my school, I did spend a lot of time with the Black community. And I was involved with the more well-to-do Black community that were the servants for Governor Brown Sr. And I remember participating with them in serving food and drinks at different kinds of celebrations at the Capitol. Art was something that I always loved to do, but I couldn't find a place for it in my life. And I couldn't find a place for it at school either. My mother imbued me with a sense of responsibility to my family and to the community. And she instilled in me the need to fight evil and to help my people. One of our practices, since many of our relatives were migrating, was to always help people who were traveling. My mother always prepared food and saved clothes. And so it was with that kind of feeling I left my parents' home to attend college. And I did begin at American River College, but it was very difficult because I did not have the money. And I was working part-time at a hamburger, Lou's Drive-In hamburgers, in order to afford my college. And it was at American River College that I met Mariana Castorena, who was a CSUS student recruiting from the Department of Engineering. And she invited me to attend CSUS and also to come along with her and see what else was interesting. And what else was interesting was she was a member of the Brown Beret organization of Sacramento. And I took to that so quickly. Felt so empowered. I felt so supported, and I felt like I was with family. So it was with the Brown Beret organization that I began to put my art in my life. One of my first steps was to sew the Brown Beret flag. And I sewed it by hand, like the Betsy Ross of the Brown Beret organization. And in our opportunities to demonstrate and put forward the needs of the Chicano community, I had the opportunity to meet a couple of other students who were also members of a group called the Royal Chicano Air Force. And they were making posters. I had never done silkscreen posters, and I was invited to assist. And I found it so fascinating and wonderful. I learned how to make silkscreen prints and advertise the projects in our community that I was developing to help, like the Breakfast for Niños program, which Mariana and I modeled after the Black Panthers free breakfast program in the Bay Area, Oakland. We actually traveled to the Bay Area, and we were given a tour of the facilities and taught their practices on how to develop a free breakfast program for the kids in our neighborhoods. And so the posters were very familiar and seen as a call to action and a participation community information as it was placed in the neighborhood. It was never seen as anything foreign, but actually how we communicated with each other. And of course, every poster had to be a work of art. So myself and the other members of the Royal Chicano Air Force, we had a lot of fun designing the posters that we created for our activist enterprises. And they stood the test of time and were very well received and collected. And somewhere in that period, attending Sacramento State College, I was invited to be a undergraduate fellow with the Mexican American Undergraduate Fellowship, which I accepted. And I was going to be a teacher. They were going to teach me how to become a teacher. They were going to help me. And the money was so excellent. I was able to actually study. I did not give up on my activism. I continued to make posters, and I continued to demonstrate, and I continued to cooperate with other intelligent people who were trying to help underprivileged communities. And I did travel in 1969 to help bring in the harvest for Cuba. And at that time, the Mexican American Education Project removed me because they felt their funding was in jeopardy, even though I had fulfilled all of my criteria for that semester, made the Dean's Honor List, and eventually became a person nominated and placed in the publication Who's Who in American universities and colleges. So art was intrinsic to my voice, and my voice was necessary to place my culture into the society where I found myself. My mother wanted me to fight evil and to help the helpless. I found myself studying to be a counselor. And one of my counseling missions turned out to be visits to some of my counseling ventures, turned out to be visits to the Youth Authority to speak with incarcerated youth, and others to Susanville Prison to actually speak with imprisoned people. And my issue with both incarcerated facilities is that the people incarcerated were not really being helped to turn their lives around, because self-respect and owning the results of what they were able to create with their own mind is not supported. And part of that problem is the 13th Amendment, which allows for a human being to be treated as a slave if they're convicted and find themselves in a prison. And I just don't see how you can evolve a person without evolving their self-respect and pride and connection with what they create with their mind. I was also a school teacher. I taught elementary school, and I was a school counselor. I counseled in junior high school and high school. And I found some of the same kinds of situations in which underprivileged, impoverished, or marginalized youth were not being communicated with in the school in a way that appealed to the most positive aspects of their culture and their values. And the result was not a real excitement towards continuing education. So in a way, schools were managing to turn kids away from higher education. Because they were not being communicated with in a way that lifted them. Now, we know that art lifts a person's spirits, it lifted mine. Art also can lift a whole community, like the posters that we put around the Washington neighborhood to advertise the free breakfast programs. So, art for me really began when I could use it not only in a beautiful way, but in a way to lift spirits and hearts and see a reflection in this society of my people, of my culture, of my values. So I could see myself, be proud, have self-respect, and be an example to all of the children that I was working with.
You know